This is the Ninja's Way podcast, where we talk all things ninja industry, ranging from top tier athletes to the local ninja entrepreneur. Listen to their journey to success as they conquer obstacles in ninja and in life. This is the Ninja's Way. Welcome, guys, to the Ninja's Way podcast and the Ninja Network Facebook group. I'm here with Alex today, and we are going to be deep diving into their brand new Ninja Playground, some of the story of how this came to be and how this affects the ninja industry. Let's start out. Walk me through the journey that brought this playground to life.
Yeah, let's start with what Neighborhood Ninjas even is, right? Because a lot of people listening might not know about that. So Neighborhood Ninjas, we're a nonprofit organization. And when we first started out, we wanted to focus on expanding access to ninja. So we started out with a scholarship program. And we were like, cool, that's awesome. We're giving kids scholarships to gyms and WNL World Championships, things like that. And they were like, okay, we want to do more. So we started a mentorship program. We started doing community days, which are like very intentional events that we do, especially with kids in foster care, to help them build growth mindset and resilience, community and connection. And then we were, okay, we're doing scholarships, we're doing mentoring, we're doing all these things, but gyms are still largely inaccessible for a lot of people, right? The hours don't work for everyone, transportation, cost, there's so many factors. And so we were like, what if there was a way that we could combine all these things? What if there was a really free and accessible space that could not only promote access to the sport, but the benefits that our sport provides, and a place where we could do our programming for free, our mentoring and community days with different groups that we want to serve. And so then Whitney Miller, who's our board president, she lives in Wilmington, Delaware. And she and I both grew up playing basketball. And she said, what if ninja was just as accessible as basketball, right? Where it's something where you could just go pick up a ball and you find a court and boom, you're doing the thing. And we were like, duh, ninja playgrounds. And so she lives in Wilmington. She made a really strong case for why she wanted Wilmington to be our first one, and specifically where in Wilmington. And then we got together a whole design team of really strong ninja athletes and coaches, and worked with a manufacturer. And here we are. We built our first ninja playground that's designed to serve everyone from absolute beginner, never hung on a bar before, to somebody who can hit an 8-foot lache outside on really thick bars.
I'm curious, was there any unforeseen obstacles that kind of got in your guys? I know that these things usually take more time and more resources than you would ever initially think, but is there anything that, any obstacles that you guys really had to overcome to get this thing put together?
Yeah, so many obstacles. It's funny because during our grand opening, I said we'd been working on this for the last year and a half, 2 years. And then Whitney looked at it and she said, no, I started having these conversations like 3 years ago, because we were having them with the state parks director at the time, who then actually left, and they switched directors of the state park system. So we had to start over again, wait for that hiring process, that transition, and then just working through the state, because it is a state-owned park. There's always going to be things that don't go as planned, take longer than anticipated. So we'd originally wanted to open in fall of 2023, and it got pushed back to this May. And part of that is weather, right? Like we probably could have had it done sometime between then and May, but we weren't going to open in the middle of winter. So that's like a big part of it. And then just planning, not just the grand opening, but we planned a community build where we had just so many different businesses and people from Wilmington and even surrounding areas. People drove from other states to help us build, which was really awesome. But it was also raining for a lot of the build. So we were out there building for a week. Like Whitney and I started building with the build crew before we planned that giant build day for everyone. It's wet. And then we ordered a certain amount of concrete and stone and all these things that we were told to order, and then, oh, we need more, or oh, this happened, or oh, this got lost. And then even the grand opening, for the entire time, our DJ was like, my equipment's really wet, can I go home? We flew out like Jamie Ron, Jesse Graff, Maggie Thorne. Like we had all these awesome ninjas there that we were so excited to have, and it was still really great, but like course demos weren't exactly a thing that could safely happen with the amount of rain. There were big things like that. And then I'm sure along the way, there were smaller things. With this first playground, we, again, a lot of state approval processes So there were a lot of things where we were like, sweet, that's approved. And then it was like, oh, just kidding. State said no, or, oh, okay, we have to change this. Even just working with the initial manufacturer design team, like our design team and their design team, we wanted to, for example, take some monkey bars out to space them a little bit more so they could do little hops. And the manufacturer was like, liability for these reasons. So no. And we're like, okay, not that one. What about this other thing? So there were a lot of behind the scenes things that people didn't see, where I feel like Whitney and I were hitting snags constantly and just figuring out, okay, how do we overcome this obstacle? Okay, next, how do we overcome this? And then some of the bigger things that people see, oh, it's pouring rain. But even with that, we had such an amazing turnout for our grand opening, and it was really great.
Yeah, rain or shine, we're gonna bring Ninja to this community, right?
Yeah.
I love that you guys planned like a community day, so everybody felt like they had a piece of actually putting it together and actually building it. So I think that was an amazing idea on your guys' part. Something that really resonated with me was your guys' mission statement for Ninja Neighbors as a whole. And it's really focused on life skills. So why don't you tell us what a mission statement is? And then also, I feel like Ninja can absolutely deliver these life skills. Is there any other type of things that you guys have implemented either in the playground itself or some of these other options that you guys offer in terms of actually being able to deliver these life skills to the people that you're helping?
Yeah. So our mission statement essentially boils down to using the sport of American Ninja Warrior as a vehicle to help kids, teens, and adults, especially really focusing on that youth and young adult population, to build confidence, connection, community, competence, growth mindset, and resilience. And there's a lot of ways that we do that naturally in our sport, right? I think that if you have a really solid gym team, solid coach, just the nature of our sport is that we are trying to overcome obstacles, and we know that we're going to fall on something like 20 times before we get it. So we're going into it with that expectation, which is not something that a lot of people go through their lives with. Outside of Neighborhood Ninjas, I've done a lot of life coaching and health coaching and coaching for other things and personal training. And I've worked with kids in foster care my entire career. I've worked in education, I've worked in mental health. And so combining all these things, what I've seen is that most people, I don't have a statistic on hand, but just like in my work, people struggle with growth mindset, right? Because a lot of people are like, if I don't get this first try, I suck and I'm a failure. And what's even the point? And I don't want to do this anymore. And I think especially groups where, so foster care, for example, right? It can be really difficult to not immediately blame yourself and your abilities. And so one of the things that we teach is how to take more of a process focused approach. And that's something that I was doing with my students. I used to run like a college access program for students in foster care. And that's something I was doing with them. And then it's something I do with the kids that I coach in Ninja. And it's okay, for example, balance, right? If you fall, you're doing a balance obstacle and you fall on balance, what does your brain do? Is your brain immediately, I suck, I'm not good enough, I give up? Or can you break it down and say, okay, the reason I fell on this obstacle is actually because I was looking too far ahead and I didn't see where my feet were. And can I rewind that back, take that pause, reframe it, and figure out a different process? And then, okay, yes, cool. Now, how can I apply that to other parts of my life? And that's a really big thing that we teach. And we do it in a trauma informed way for depending on like the group that we're working with. We also just like, worked with schools. And yeah, I think the community days, they're like really structured 2.5 hour events where we're teaching them how to trust themselves more, how to trust others more, how to communicate with others and themselves, what their comfort zones are, like being able to voice that and express that. And then how do we work through that and work through that communication and that self-talk and that perception of abilities through obstacles alone and others.
Absolutely. Something that you said earlier was that this was in a very specific and strategic location of where this playground actually ended up. So why don't you speak a little bit to that decision, and as you guys look forward to the future of other playgrounds to potentially go, what is that criteria? What are we looking for when we're placing this playground?
Yeah, so the first thing we're looking for is ideally a low income or rural area. And where we put this playground in Wilmington, I don't know how much I am able to say, but I will say it. Whitney actually moved to Wilmington 10 years ago because she and her husband was a minister, pastor, and they are really into mission work. And at that time, Wilmington was actually referred to as Murder Town USA in Newsweek. And so it has a very high violent crime rate. There's not a lot of safe spaces for teens to engage in physical activity or play, depending on where you are. The location that we chose is directly in the middle of two very diverse socioeconomic neighborhoods, right? And somewhere that is monitored and safe for people to come in and access. It's
Sure.
also free for people to come in and access. And part of our goal is to actually bring those two areas together and bring together people who might not normally interact with each other. Because I think that I remember like playing basketball growing up, I would meet all these people, which I mean, back in the 90s is a little different than now, but like I would meet all these people that like I probably wouldn't have interacted with otherwise, either in my friend group or maybe my school or my school sports, whatever it was. And that's how we learn. That's how we become more tolerant of others. That's how we like have different life experiences. But beyond that, we wanted it to be safe, free, and accessible. Like those are the main things. And we want to give something for the entire family to do. So we opened on May 18th. And since that time, it's been really cool to just like Whitney's sending me videos every day of just seeing just whole families out there playing, like kids racing their parents on the monkey bars. And I've talked to parents that are like, yeah, when my kids are at other playgrounds, I literally just sit on the bench and I watch them. I'm on my phone. And then now all of a sudden you've got like cliffhangers and these like things that I've seen on TV that I want to try.
Yeah.
And we're all doing it together. And that was another really big push for us is, okay, how can we create more connected and healthy families? And then in turn, like connected and healthy communities.
Yeah, absolutely. What other kinds of impacts have you guys seen since it's been in the local community?
Yeah, it's been really cool, honestly. So I was there for a couple days before flying back to Texas, like after the opening, and we all showed up in our Ninja Fit playground shirts that I totally was not making at 2 a.m. before the grand opening. So people were like, "Oh, we saw you at the grand opening," or "Oh, you're wearing the shirt. Are you a ninja?" And so we like start having this conversation. And for me, I've had a couple of parents come up to me and say, "Thank you," for a few different reasons. One was a mom whose son is on the autism spectrum, and she was like, I have literally never seen him play on a playground before in my entire life, and this meets a sensory need for him in a way that other playgrounds don't. And that was actually something we were hoping when we built this as well, like really again increasing access in multiple ways. We partnered with the Wilmington area, it's a long name, Wilmington area Rotary Clubs for funding for this playground, and they built Can Do Playground. It's right next door, and it's this wheelchair accessible playground. And so access for folks of all ability levels is really important to them too. And so we talked about, okay, how can this playground increase access in other ways as well, besides just financial? And so I've heard from that mom and a couple others with kids who are like on the spectrum and other sensory needs like ADHD, where this is something where they're suddenly active for maybe the first time ever and making friends in the process for the first time ever, which was really cool. I've had families come up to me and say, this is the first time we've done an outdoor activity as a family together. I know, so Whitney is a mom of 3, right? And she was out there doing stuff on the playground, and now she's got women's classes that she's running at it, like free women's classes through Neighborhood Ninjas, because other moms are watching her and they're like, I literally have been saying, I can't, I'm not strong enough, right? All these things. And then now watching Whitney, she's inspired a whole generation of moms who are then now bringing their kids out there too. And again, like healthy and connected families. So there's been a lot of really cool impact. And even just honestly, even the vendors that we had at our grand opening, we've heard from them that they're getting more business now because we exposed their business during that grand opening. Yeah. So there's just so many cool things. And I'm sure that we're going to continue to see impact. There's a lot of schools that are doing field trips out there now. And we're actually planning those community days that I mentioned. We are planning to do a handful of them in the upcoming months, and we're working with groups like different foster care agencies. There's a juvenile justice program that we've worked with in the area before that we actually worked with half of their group, and we brought them to I-Corps, and the other half couldn't cross county lines. So they go. And so now this playground's actually within the jurisdiction that they can go. So we're going to work with them. Yeah. So like the impact's only, it's been not, like 2 weeks, not even, and the impact's just.
I think that in my own career as being a ninja coach, there is so many people and kids that feel like they just don't fit in anywhere else, right? Or they're on the spectrum and they have these additional sensory needs and these things that maybe kept them from team sports. I know me personally, like I just wasn't good, but Ninja just has this kind of unique quality that can really help people get over some of those hurdles and connect with them that in that way. It sounds like you guys have been really creative with trying to reach out to those types of people and inviting them into what you guys have created. We're in the midst of world season, right? We got a lot of big competitions coming up. And I know that you guys do a sponsorship program. What would you give in terms of advice for parents or athletes that are trying to raise money to get to Worlds, and whether it's through your organization or just some other strategies that you guys have used yourself in the past?
Yeah, honestly, anyone's welcome to apply for a scholarship through us. It's interesting because like we do very much rely on the community to fundraise for Worlds, and we ask the community to help us with sponsoring, and they've always been really great. I think if folks are trying to fund their own way there, like GoFundMe's have been awesome. We've seen people raise a lot of money through GoFundMe's, asking people to sponsor you and tell them what sponsorship amount you get. And one of our goals this year is to raise even more money so that we can increase our scholarship amount, because when we first started it, it was like we're just covering the cost of registration.
Sure.
And then now with travel and stuff like that, like I'm looking at these applications, picture a kid that's got to travel with a parent, and maybe there's another kid and they can't leave the kid at home. And then we're looking at it and it's $3,000 of a bill for them to get there. I'm like, this is wild. And so honestly, like more than even just how to raise money for it, like almost a different set of advice that I have is, so the first year that we did it, we had kids who fell on obstacle one. This might have been year one or year two. I think this was the year of the swivel steps in Hartford. So this might have been year two, if you remember the swivel steps, bringing back some memories for people. But we had a lot of kids who fell on obstacle one, and they came up to me afterwards because I had a neighborhood ninjas table, and they were like, they were so upset, and they were like, I'm so sorry, I wasted your money, I fell. And talking about that growth mindset piece that we were talking about earlier, right? It was a really good learning opportunity where I was talking to them and saying, I honestly, I don't care how you did it. I didn't bring you here for you to win, right? We brought you here because we wanted you to have that experience. Like you worked so hard. We wanted you to be able to have the same experience that everybody else was having, to be able to meet people, right? For some of these people, they're like meeting their idols. We gave a scholarship to a girl with cystic fibrosis who like loved Naj because he also had cystic fibrosis, and they were able to connect on that level. And he gave her like the best pep talk of her life, and it was life-changing for her. So there's so much more to this experience than just how you do, but I feel like there's so much pressure. And I was one of those scholarship kids. We actually started the program because I couldn't afford to go to Worlds the first year I qualified, and one of my Ninja friends was like, here, I'm going to pay for you to do this. It was actually Rachel Rodriguez. And then we were like, cool, we're going to actually, this is a great idea. Let's start a scholarship. But like growing up in high school and stuff like that, I was one of those kids that relied on that. And then there's so much added pressure because of it, because you're like, somebody's helping me, I have to do really well. And so I'm not saying don't go out there and not care at all, but I am saying it's so much more than how you do. And if you're not able to get there this year, there is always next year. And it's just keep working hard, and hopefully we'll reach a point where we figure something out where it's more accessible for everyone. But it's you as a ninja, like you're so much more than how you do at a competition and I know this is the world championships. It's like everything boils down to this one moment, but it doesn't, because all the things you learn, all the strengths, you can't be captured by this one competition.
Absolutely. And it's a good opportunity for them to work on that growth mindset. And it could be a lot of pressure at Worlds. I know for us personally, we sponsored an athlete to go to Worlds this year, as well as in the past of just doing like basic fundraisers, looking for business sponsors, t-shirts that all the kids are going to wear with their logo on them. Those are just some fun ideas that we've used as gym owners and coaches to help kids get there. But I love that you guys have officialized this and been able to get this to more kids. I love to talk about the team behind the build. So tell me a little bit about these individuals and how do you feel like they contributed to the end result?
Yeah, so we had a lot of different kind of sub teams. Like we had Whitney and I were doing all of the planning throughout for the last 2 years. There were a lot of behind the scenes things, a lot of meetings, a lot of planning that had to happen. And then we also had our design team, which was awesome. And that consisted of folks like Jesse Graff, Matt Bradley, Kara Mack, Karsten Williams. I don't want to leave people out. There's so many though. We had a lot of people. I'll be here naming people all day. So we had that design team that kind of came together to make this happen. Some of them are on our board. Some of them just wanted to help and are great designers and coaches and athletes. And so we came together We are working with a manufacturer, so lots of approvals to make that happen. And then we had our boards. We've got some awesome people on there that are really great with helping with planning events and those types of things. So we all came together to plan that and plan the build day. And the community builds, we had a lot of different sponsors in the community, right? So you're talking about kids being sponsored by businesses. That's a thing that we did for obstacles, different businesses coming out, sponsoring different obstacles, people just donating. We ran our pull-ups for playgrounds competition again, which our board was awesome and helped out with, and fundraised that way. We did a big fancy dinner. So everybody played a different role with what were they planning and fundraising for. And then for the community builds, we got like Home Depot and Renewal by Anderson, all these different businesses to come out and physically help with building. And we had people who like have never used a tool before in their lives, and they came out and we showed them exactly what to do. We had the manufacturer had their lead engineer showing everybody what needed to be done, and it was a really great experience. And I was saying to them, it's so cool because when you look back on this and you watch people playing months or years from now on an ops that you put together, it's like you made this happen. That's incredible.
There's a lot of generational impact with something like this, which I think is
Absolutely.
cool. Obviously, you talked a lot about sponsors. Like, how exactly are these things funded? Are you guys using outside businesses? Are you using that local community park center that you were talking about? And what is the main incentive for somebody who maybe wants to get involved with you guys to be a sponsor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a nonprofit, we are able to apply for grant funding, and also donations to us are tax deductible, which is always fun for a business. And so we offer different sponsorship packages for obstacles. For example, let's say, we call it the ledge hanger instead of the cliffhanger because copyright, but the ledge hanger, let's say that was like $15,000 for that one obstacle, right? So somebody could either sponsor the entire ledge hanger for 15,000, or we would say, okay, if you did, let's say 5,000 of the 15,000, here's what you would get. And so we had a really solid sponsorship package for that. There's a lot of promotion, and also they got signage next to the obstacle that they sponsored with their logo and a QR code to their website. So it's literally eternal advertising. And we gave them promo space at our grand opening if they wanted to take advantage of that. Although we still had people signed up, but the rain was not so much. And then social media promotion from us, and then our board's awesome, and we have a big reach with the folks on our board as well. So social media, newsletter, and then back of t-shirts, logo on t-shirts, logo on banner, logo on all the things, logo everywhere. And I really think just there are a lot of companies that want to sponsor because they just want to be a part of something amazing, and our sponsorship package is not that big, where it's not that expensive, where they can't feasibly do it, but we also offer so much value in exchange for it. That's a big one. And then grant funding, we got money from the state as well. It was like a grant / a bill that they put in for us. And we actually got, it was really cool. We got a really big grant where they actually gave us more than we had applied for, because we had to do a couple of rounds of interviews, and I explained our programming to them and how this isn't just a playground. Playgrounds are awesome, but here's what we do as Neighborhood Ninjas. And they gave us extra, which was super, super cool. And that programming is something that we aim to do at every single playground that we build. If somebody's looking to get involved.
I would love to dig a little deeper into that. So what makes this different from just your regular playground, other than the fact that you're going to see some obstacles from the show? But how does this, you're talking a little bit about programming. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that make it different. First thing is obviously like ninja obstacles, right? Second thing that makes it different is that the actual layout was designed by people like Jesse and Karsten and Matt Bradley, right? And those types of people, where we did it very intentionally, where we can do full course runs. And we actually are planning our first competition for October. Stay tuned on that. This is my official, unofficial announcement. So there's that. But so we designed it in a way where people can either do it as a full course, they can go head to head on it. There's different options, but then also things are spaced in a way where if you've never hung on a bar before, you can work on the monkey bars, or it's not even just monkey bars, they're like wavy, they go up and down, but we also spaced them 7.5 feet apart so you can lache.
Oh, nice.
And there's different pieces there where it's, if you've done ninja, you can see things that are more challenging. And if you haven't done ninja, I think a lot of people that were there at our grand opening would never think to attempt a lache, obviously, right?
Sure. Or even know what it is.
Exactly. It gives us options in the way that it's laid out and like the exact spacing between obstacles.
Mm.
And then you mentioned the programming. So
Yeah.
this was a thing we talked a lot about in our grants that we applied for, is the programming that we're going to do. So typically in the past, we've done our community days with gyms. Like we've partnered with gyms and we've brought in like local foster care agencies. We did that juvenile justice program with I-Corps. Now we're going to get to do it at the playground, and we're going to get to do it for free, which is super exciting. It goes back to that accessibility piece. It also teaches people how to get comfortable in that space. And because then that encourages them to come back, right? So
Yeah.
I haven't done it at the playground yet, so I have to see, because you know how playground equipment, I feel like it wrecks your hands a little faster than like
Sure.
being in a gym. So I have to see like on timing if it's going to look exactly the same as it always has. But
Mm.
we really, with that programming, we really start out on helping them with communication and trust. I do a comfort zone activity, helping them figure out, okay, what is your comfort zone in different scenarios. It starts out silly and then it gets a little more serious, and not just ninja, but just like life.
Yeah.
And then, okay, how do we apply it to this? How do we apply the communication principles to this? How do we apply self-talk to this? How do we apply teamwork to this? So they're going to go through all of that before they even touch an obstacle. And then as they touch the obstacles, it's really, and I'm sure you get this, like it's the coaching and stuff through that is the key there, because like our volunteers are awesome, and there's a lot of really awesome coaches, but they really are very intentional with how they speak to the participants and catching them in whatever that self-talk is and helping them reframe it, helping them shift from a more abilities based to a more process based approach, like a strengths based approach. So like I was saying before, where we're so quick to doubt our abilities, we help them reframe it into a strengths based perspective where they can then identify what their process is and work through communication. Yeah, a lot of that, and it's just a lot of fun, and you learn things 4 times faster through play, which is I think one of the reasons why Ninja is so awesome. And so that's what we're trying to do, right? It's take these concepts and help them learn them faster through play.
I love that. How do you feel like this Ninja Fit and Ninja Neighbors interacts with the ninja industry as a whole?
Yeah, Neighborhood Ninjas has been around for 5 years now. So we've been around for a while. And I think we're at the point now where we're expanding in different ways, like doing the playgrounds versus before it was very like program focused and scholarship focused. And so I think the industry as a whole, we know that we're a whole sport, right, outside of the show. And we also have grown to the point where we're trendy. And so we have a lot of gyms. And I know you work a lot with gyms and gym owners, so I'm sure you've seen this, like gymnastic gyms, for example, that want to start ninja programs, right? There's a lot of gyms that are trying to do this. And because of that, and because of it being like this niche thing, gyms are charging a lot. Like it is becoming the new gymnastics, where it is really expensive. My hope, it's twofold, right? Is if we have these playgrounds, then it becomes just as accessible as basketball, and we can have more great athletes in our sport, and that's increasing kind of that area. But then also, as these are free and accessible and we can do our programming, then we're increasing access to the benefits that sport provides. We're going to have our mentoring programs on pause right now. We had a mentoring program we ran for a couple of years, but I want to revamp that and get that set up at playground locations so we can have group
Cool.
mentoring come back. Yeah. And have it be at the playgrounds. And then, so, okay, I'm thinking about this playground in Wilmington, right? Like people are going to use it, but then I don't know what's going to happen in December when if there's 2 feet of snow. I don't know. Are people going to go ninja in the snow? That sounds fun, but they might not. And it is one of those things, like, could people, because even just not from a financial perspective, but just in general, like I got my start on playgrounds from like a rural perspective. I was living in rural Connecticut. I also couldn't afford to go to a gym, but I started on playgrounds and I was hanging like cannonballs and ropes and different things, right? On like little teeny tiny elementary school playgrounds.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, like I was training other women at these playgrounds who like didn't even have the confidence to hang on a bar. And so maybe people, let's say in the Wilmington playground, we're going to get these mom classes, because that's another thing we're doing in addition to the community days. We're doing free classes. So I know Whitney's doing some mom classes. Maybe they start at the playground, they learn to dead hang, maybe they learn to do a pull-up, they build up that confidence. And then in December, when it's cold and snowy, maybe now they're going to I-Corps, and now that's additional business for I-Corps as well, right? And now they're doing a competition, they're doing their first comp, and then now they're qualifying for Worlds. And it really does all fit together, but it just meets people where they're at in different life cycles.
This industry is still very new, right? And so there's a lot of lack of standardization. And because of this, maybe we're not as far along as a sport, maybe like gymnastics.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk to me a little bit about your Partners in Prevention program and what you can provide to gyms to maybe help their gym and their spaces just become a little bit more safe for the athletes that they work with.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Partners in Prevention is a program from Darkness to Light, which is the national leader in child safety and child sexual abuse prevention. And so that's one of the things that we take super seriously is if we're going to work with a gym, we want them to go through that training because you're talking about like lack of standardization. One of the cool things about Ninja, but one of the stressful things about Ninja is that it really does bring together people from all over the country. I don't know any other sport besides maybe OCR where people know each other the way that we do. Where like if I wanted to go visit a state, I know people in every single state that it would just be like, yeah, cool, come stay with me and let's go train while we're out here. That's cool.
Yeah.
But because of that, and because of like the age piece of how competitions are, we have minors and adults traveling together often, competing together often, training together often. And so one of the things we try to do is really teach gyms like, okay, here's what best practices are to keep your athletes safe. Here's how to do active bystander intervention. Here's what to do as a mandated reporter. Because okay, also like I worked for DCF, right? Like I worked in education. I've been a mandated reporter my whole life. I've coached at multiple ninja gyms. How many of them actually told me I was a mandated reporter when I started? Yeah. And I was like, oh, maybe they know that I work for DCF and they just assume that, because I used to run the mandated reporter training. Like they just know, they just assume. But then the more I talk to people, I'm like, oh, people really don't know what to do. And Winnie and I are the ones that like a lot of people in the community come to when there are different instances and there's inappropriate things going on. And even I was talking to a gym recently and they didn't realize if you have let's say two 15-year-olds or 16, 50-year-old, whatever, and they're like sending nudes back and forth, like that's technically porn, like that's illegal. And so there's just like little things like that where they're like, wait, you said what? We had no idea. And talking through some of those things and it's okay, how can we make gyms safer? But also I talk a lot about what are the warning signs of abuse, sexual abuse, regular abuse, all of that, because our ninjas are not just ninjas, right? They're whole humans who also do ninja. And so a lot of times we'll have coaches talking about behavioral issues with their kids. And is it a behavioral issue or is it connection seeking? And if it's connection, we talk about like attention seeking. And I always tell people to reframe that as connection seeking. And if they're seeking connection that desperately, what else is going on, because potentially they're not getting it at home, or there might be some warning signs that something else might be going on. And how can we support our athletes? But also as a coach, you might be the biggest mentor that they have in their lives. And so if anything is going on at home or at school or with another kid in the class, or maybe with another coach at the gym, you're going to be the first person that they tell. And what do you do when that happens? And what we're finding is a lot of coaches are just like, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do with my body language. Like I had no idea. So we're just trying to empower them so that they are more prepared. And then also we do the code of conduct with them. We help them revamp their code of conducts for their gym. A lot of gyms don't have code of conducts. They need to fix that. And just giving them tools to, when you bring in a new team or a new class or new parents, what do you want to be communicating with them and how frequently, so that you're setting up not just this information, but a whole culture for your gym. What is the culture that you want in there?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting piece of connecting it to the culture, because I know a lot of gym owners, they think about this a lot, but I don't know if this kind of safety and this kind of prevention even crosses their mind, right? They're thinking about, oh, can I have good careers and a good, a healthy workplace and those kinds of things. But very rarely do I think that they are actually thinking about these things. So how is this delivered? Are you guys doing a course? You go to the gym? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we can do it virtually or we can do it in person at a gym. I've done both. Either one is fine. And it's about 2.5 hours long. And it goes over all those pieces, like I mentioned, mandated reporting, warning signs, bystander intervention, code of conduct, all of those pieces, and then tries to apply it to scenarios that they have specifically in their gym, things they might be dealing with as well. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that in general, as a community, we tend to be more reactive with this stuff. We've had a couple of instances, one very public instance a couple of years ago, right, where and I was working for that gym at the time. Yeah. And so we've had a couple instances where it's like it happens. And then people are like, oh, that's not reflective of our community. That was just that one person. But how many people knew and didn't do anything, right? And then it's okay, is it just that one person? Or is there something else going on? Because it's not just one gym, right? Or it's not just one person. It's one person was in the spotlight. Let's put it that way. I think trying to be more proactive than reactive. And when we always say not our community, but then every time there are signs, we look away. And I think part of that is we are such a tight-knit community that we are just like really afraid to rock the boat with other people, because it's like you have to see them at comps literally all the time. I think just having those conversations and setting it up as this is the culture, but then also knowing what to do and when to do it, I think is important, because then at least, because I think that's also part of it, right? Like sometimes we're afraid to rock the boat, but sometimes we're afraid not because we know and then make the decision, but because we're unsure and we're like, what if I make the wrong decision?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And giving them the framework and the code of conduct and something to always come back to, right? This is the basis. This is how
Yeah.
we're going to make these decisions. And I think that even feeds into like their own core values of their gym and the culture that they're creating of this is the filter that we make these decisions by. But I do think that it's something that's maybe not talked about enough. So thanks for sharing about that. We spoke a little bit about the ninja community. What do you feel like is unique to ninja? And now that as a coach and an athlete yourself, what do you see that is different from other sports?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think when I first started, so I started back in 2018, I want to say, and I had done so many other sports. Like I'd done track and basketball and OCR and powerlifting and all the things, right? And I felt like Ninja was supportive in a way that I had not experienced in other sports before. And it's interesting. I don't actually know what causes that, but I just felt like it was just very welcoming and supportive in a way that I hadn't seen. And maybe that's what you're saying before, where it's like a lot of people who felt like they didn't fit in other sports and then they found Ninja. I think Ninja also just encourages a lot of creative problem solving, which like goes back to that growth mindset piece. There's no right way to do something. So I feel like sometimes in other sports, it's this is the thing that you need to do and this is how you do it. And it's like with Ninja, you do things the way that works for you, and other people have the ability to learn from you and you have the ability to learn from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying that, we run a Facebook group where people can ask questions and coaches can ask these kinds of questions. And one of these questions that was brought up, which I think might share some insight into this, was like, there is proper technique for specific obstacles, but we also want to encourage kids to approach it differently, do it backwards, do it with your feet instead of your hands, or whatever that might be. And so the question was like, where do we draw the line between allowing kids to be creative thinkers and be creative problem solvers, but also not lack on proper techniques? What do you think about that?
I feel like my concern is more about proper conditioning. Like as a
Sure.
strength conditioning coach, my concern is always more proper conditioning, because if you have the basics, then you can mess with the technique. But like the amount of rotator cuff and Achilles tears that I see, and I'm
Yep.
like, okay, you didn't have the foundation. Like no
Yep.
amount of right technique in the world is going to help you if your rotator cuffs are weak, you don't have the foundations, like your ankle mobility is garbage. There's all these things where I'm like, let's start with the foundations, and let's make sure that we're properly incorporating that into our conditioning, because I've seen a lot of gyms do obstacle conditioning. Like, okay, we're doing pull-ups as part of our warm-up, and I'm like, but what's the warm-up to the pull-ups, right?
Right. Yep.
Or like we're starting with a run, and I'm like, that's great, like I could do that when I was 8 too, but what's the warm-up
Sure.
to the run? But I think that as far as technique for some of these obstacles, I feel like I can't even keep up anymore. Like I'm coming back from like a hamstring nerve injury situation where like I haven't competed in a little bit. And in the time that I've been away from competition, I feel like everything's changed, because now it's about how fast can you do it. I was like, and I was just like mastering this obstacle, and now I have to do it like on 5x speed. Okay. As far as technique goes, like linking is a good example. I was over at Dexterity with some people like 2 weeks ago, and I was watching the quote unquote new linking technique that all the kids are
Okay.
doing. I'm like, what do you mean? I just learned how to link the other way. What is this? But
Yeah.
And but it's interesting because I'm like, okay, if your rotator cuffs are healthy enough for this and they're strong enough for this, then okay, did you just invent a new technique? That's actually cool. I like that. That's how, but how risky is this in terms of injury is always my question. So I don't know if that actually answered it, but
No.
that's
I think that's a great framework to look at it from a coach's perspective.
yeah.
I personally had a complete shoulder reconstruction from trying to throw a lache that I just wasn't ready for.
Yeah.
And then my shoulder was never the same. And now I'm
Yeah.
still trying to come back from that. Those things are really important to think about, especially as we're growing up young athletes, of what is their foundation. And are we assessing this? Are we making sure that in these warm-ups, like you were talking about, what does your warm-up look like, right? I personally love doing really regressed versions of these obstacles or of these skills as part of that warm up so that it's directly linking to what they're actually doing. Alex, how can we get in touch with you? How can we get involved with Ninja Neighbors? Why don't you give the audience just a little, how can we reach you?
Yeah. So probably best way is email. So info@neighborhoodninjas.org is probably the best way to reach me. It also goes to alex@neighborhoodninjas.org. So if you can't remember info, just do it to my name. You can find us on Instagram. It's neighborhood_ninjas. So that's pretty easy. We are sometimes on Facebook, but you can always DM us on Facebook and I'll find it eventually. But yeah, email is probably the best way for folks, or Instagram DM for them to get in touch with me. And we are looking for where our future playground locations are going to be. We're taking requests. We're going to have an actual open application at some point. We do have, I think, our next location picked out already, which is
I
very
was going
exciting.
to ask you, but I wasn't
Uh,
sure if you were able to say.
I'm not going to say where, but I will say that it is up in the New England region somewhere. In whatever those states are that make up New England, somewhere over there where they have 4 seasons. And yeah, so that's going to be our next one. But honestly, like we're trying to, I would be open to doing more than one next year if I have the capacity for it. And we're bringing some exciting people onto our team this year to help us with growing that. And like I said, we're really looking for like low income in rural areas. But if there's somebody who's not in one of those areas that makes a good pitch for why they want one there, we're happy to work with them because it's still expanding the sport of ninja. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And more playgrounds, and you never know who you're going to reach. And then also we are, like you said, in the middle of World's season. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to sponsor a kid, it's $150 to sponsor a kid. But if you can't afford to sponsor a kid, even just any donation of any amount helps. If everybody listening to this donated $5, imagine how many kids we would be able to help get to Worlds. And I will also just say part of the reason we started that scholarship program is because like even just reading these scholarship applications, right? Like the things that some of these kids are going through, like whether it's financial or these are the kids who like maybe can't go on field trips at school, right? And they feel just so left out and different than their peers. Or like I've read applications from, there was one kid a couple of years ago, like their family had a house fire and they lost everything. And like all this kid wanted was to be able to go to Worlds because they'd spent the whole year working so hard. And this is the one like normal thing in their life, was the ability to go and compete and feel normal in the midst of all the chaos. The stories that we read, first of all, this it seems silly, right? It's just a competition. What's the big deal to people who have never experienced that? But I can also tell you, as a kid who didn't get to go on field trips, it makes a really big difference in just your perception of self, perception, how much people care about you, having normal experiences, which from a neuroscience perspective, like the more adverse experiences you have, you need more normal experiences to counteract them for brain development, for healthy brain development. So it's so much more than just, do I get to compete at Worlds? And so if you're listening to this, even $5 would help.
Alex, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about what you guys are doing with this Ninja Neighbors organization. And I really appreciate your insights.